Well, hello there, everyone. I'm sorry about the short delay this afternoon rather. We were just having a few technical problems, but those all seem to have been resolved now. So I think most people have joined us, so we'll make a start. So today I'll be speaking to you about social media in the library and how you can discover best practice. I hope that you find the session useful and that it's going to inspire you to try some new approaches within your own library social media accounts. So firstly, I'll be giving an overview of what I will cover in today's webinar. I'll begin by setting some context and explaining a little bit more about the research which Taylor and Francis have undertaken, why we decided to look at social media in the first place as the theme for a white paper which we've put together, and the methods that we use to conduct this research. I'm then going to move on to some of the key findings that we made, sharing some of the most interesting discoveries with you. We'll then look at case studies of specific ways in which libraries are currently using and applying social media, and I'll share some best practice recommendations which are based on all that we've learned throughout the whole process. There will be time, hopefully, for questions at the very end of the session, so please do message any of those through to me at any point during the webinar, and I'll answer as many as we have time for at the end. I'll also be recording today's presentation, so for those who are unable to watch or you want to review it again at a later time, then that will be available and you'll be sent an email with details of how to access that after the presentation ends. So, firstly, I'd like to start with a very brief explanation of who Taylor and Francis are for those of you who are unfamiliar with us. Well, Taylor and Francis are one of the world's leading publishers of scholarly journals, books, e-books and reference works. We publish under a number of different imprints, some of which you can see here and hopefully you'll be aware of. So Routledge, Taylor and Francis, CRC Press, Psychology Press and Garland Science. We're an international publisher, and so we have a network of offices across the globe who all provide local expertise and support to library communities. We're proud of having a very strong publishing heritage. We have a number of famous names who have chosen to publish with us over the years, and those include Charles Darwin and Angela Merkel, for those who are interested to know. But equally, we're very keen to be at the forefront of new technology, and we aim to work alongside our library partners to continually innovate and improve working practices. We're very proud of the long history we have, which is dedicated to meeting the needs of the library community. So we aim to work together to continue navigating the changing landscape of library service provision. So probably a very, very important question to begin with is, why look at social media in the library? Well, social media has the potential to facilitate much closer relationships between libraries and their customers. It enables them to overcome geographic barriers and make contact with their users wherever they might be based and however they're choosing to access library services. So it's clear that social media holds many opportunities for libraries, but also many challenges. Current usage of social media remains ad hoc and at a somewhat experimental stage, but the use of social media tools is accelerating and they're likely to play an increasingly important role in library service provision in the future. So it's against this backdrop that Taylor and Francis decided to undertake the research and compilation of white paper to provide an overview of current practices from which individual institutions can benchmark their own activities and be inspired to try new approaches. So in terms of the white paper itself, I'll just move on to the next view for you. The white paper is a formal document which Taylor and Francis have produced to share the key findings of the research that we've undertaken into social media use by the library. It can be downloaded for free, along with all the supporting top-level data behind the survey that we conducted, and I'll share some further details with you towards the end of the session about how you can access all of that. So how do we go about conducting the research? Well, the programme was truly international in its scope and conducted through a number of different channels. Overall, we contacted over 600 librarians who all contributed to the research, and it comprised of focus groups, which we held in the UK, the US and India. The focus groups in the UK and the US were facilitated by librarians, and in India by TNF staff. We held 10 telephone interviews with thought leaders from the library community, and those individuals came from the US, the UK, Canada and Switzerland. We held a Twitter party where we invited followers of our Twitter account to join us for an hour-long discussion and so that they could share their experiences of using social media with us. So all in all, at this Twitter party, we had 73 registrants from around the world, and it resulted in 260 mentions, which for an hour-long discussion gives you some indication of how active that was. After the party ended, we created a story file, which is pictured here, which documented the online conversation, and you can still access that online now at the link there on the screen. So when we sent out the online survey, we asked respondents to share a little bit more information about their backgrounds so that we could incorporate that information into our analysis. Looking at respondents from a country-by-country basis, there were 490 responses to the survey overall, and you can see here that by far the majority came from the US with 182, followed by the UK with 50, and then India and Australia. We also had wider representation then from South America, wider Europe, and Asia. So this doesn't give us enough of a representative sample to draw conclusions about different approaches to social media on a country-by-country basis. But as I mentioned before, we did run focus groups, which gave us a huge amount of qualitative feedback, and that pointed to similarities between the US and the UK in terms of how they were approaching social media and to what extent they were using it in the library, and then differences between those countries and India, where there's a lot of interest in the potential of social media as a communication tool, but perhaps less practical use at present. We then asked librarians to tell us what type of institution they were based at. So the majority of responses came from librarians who worked in academic sectors, with some small representation here from other areas such as public and professional. We also asked librarians to identify their job titles so that we could see if there were any conclusions we could draw about how they were using social media depending on the role they held in the library. We then grouped the 32 different job titles that we received into the 6 categories you can see here. So library administration, training and education, collections, acquisitions, e-resources and subscription management roles, communication roles, digital information and services roles, and technical support. We've since run extensive analysis to determine if a particular library role could be associated with certain types of social media activity. However, when you have a chance to look at the published data which is available online, you'll be able to see that in actual fact there's very few correlations between a given role and an individual library's approach to social media. So this could lead us to believe that rather than being attached to a specific job, role or level within the library, social media is being picked up by those who have a specific interest or talent in it. Interestingly, the data also showed that there's a growing number of new roles in the library which are dedicated to communications and social media. 10 respondents to the survey identified themselves as a social media manager, 7 as an outreach or communications librarian, and 1 as a head of marketing. When looking at audience size, the majority of respondents worked in libraries who had fewer than 5,000 full-time equivalent students, although you can see here there's a sizable minority also who are using social media to reach communities of in excess of 25,000. We would like to complete further analysis to determine whether audience size has any influence on how and why social media accounts are set up and managed. So this all gives you some idea of how we collected the research to inform our white paper, along with a profile of those who contributed to the research. So what I'll do now is take you through some of the key findings that we made. So we asked librarians how important the use of social media was in their library, and we asked them to rate that on a scale of 1 to 10, which is represented in the bar chart here at the top. So in the very dark green on the left-hand side, you can see that about 1 in every 10 librarians said that it was rating as 10 out of 10, extremely important to them. And then there were another 10% who said it was 9 out of 10, which is represented in the slightly lighter green on the next bar along. So overall, if we add up all of those in green, so those who are leaning more towards the important end of that scale, it encompasses more than 70% of the librarians questioned who feel that social media use is very important in their library. We can also then look at how well entrenched the use of social media is in the library by asking how long social media accounts have been active. So nearly half of librarians surveyed said they've been using social media for between 3 to 5 years. When we then add in those who said more than 5 years, that comes to just over 60%. We then also asked how many social media accounts that librarians owned. And in this bar chart here, in the bottom right-hand side, you can see that just over a third had 1 or 2 accounts, and just under a third had 3 or 4 accounts. Well, these, of course, could be multiple accounts on the same platform, or they could be one account on each of several different channels. But we're looking at which channels librarians are using in particular in a moment. So it seems that most librarians have been using social media for a number of years and generally think it has a very important role to play. So when we look at specific channels being used, you can see here that by far the most popular social media site is Facebook. 58% said they used it regularly, with 1 in 5 saying they used it all the time. That's the very dark green bars on the left-hand side there. And there were only 12% who said that they didn't use the channel at all. Twitter then is slightly less popular, with 46% saying they used it regularly, but there were nearly twice the number saying they've not used it at all compared to Facebook at 21%. Again, the red bars on the right-hand side. Blogging was less popular again, in third place with 30%. However, when compared to the other channels included in the poll, we can see that this is actually a very strong third place. So other channels, which we see here, are Google+, Instagram, Pinterest, and academia.edu. They all had between 60 and 80% of librarians saying they had never used them. So there are 3 quite interesting observations that can be made from all of this. Despite the popularity amongst librarians, increasingly students are saying that they're not using Facebook as much as they used to. One librarian commented in one of our focus groups that a student mentioned that their parents are getting onto Facebook, so they're getting off of it. In our focus groups again, librarians also suggested that users are starting to prefer more visual and less text-based media. Someone mentioned that users are increasingly searching by image first, text second. Yeah, as you can see in this chart, Flickr, Instagram, Pinterest, etc. haven't really broken through into a lot of the libraries, or those who we questioned as part of our survey at least. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the grey bars on the far right-hand side. These show the percentage of librarians who said that they plan to start using these channels in the future. And the fact that all of these grey bars are pretty much the same size shows that perhaps this is still at a very experimental stage for librarians, so there's no clear winning social media platform that's yet to emerge. So this screenshot here is from one of our accompanying infographics to the white paper, and it summarises some of the key opportunities and challenges that librarians see social media representing. Opportunities on the left there in green and challenges on the right-hand side in orange and red. To look at this in more depth, I'll now separate some of the specific opportunities and challenges which were highlighted in the survey findings. So the most popular opportunity relating to the use of social media was the chance to raise the professional profile of the library, with 72% of survey respondents feeling that this was an opportunity for them. Other opportunities cited including the freedom to connect regularly with users and collaboration with other departments within their organisation, which indicates perhaps that social media is seen as a freer alternative communication channel which can be used in a more informal way to reach key audiences. Advantages and benefits for libraries through using social media are quite varied and generally seem to be perceived low cost with very little required training, the ability to disseminate news and promotional messages quickly, the opportunity to promote library holdings, which helps to increase the usage of content, increasing engagement and interaction with the library users. It's a channel through which to gain feedback and enhance user services, and then outreach activities through onward sharing beyond the institution itself is an opportunity that it presents which wouldn't have been there otherwise. Moving on to challenges, it's probably no surprise that the most significant challenge which the survey respondents cited was seen to be time and resource, with 67% saying that this was a challenging issue for them. This was then followed by judging an appropriate tone for communications, so whether to use a formal versus an informal voice, with 64% citing this as being a challenge for them. And then making sure that others were aware of the library's social media activities in the first place was cited by 61%. Other challenges which were seen to be significant issues were the considerable time commitment which is required from library staff and how they balance that alongside other parts of their jobs, the requirement of technological expertise, selecting an informal but presentable tone or delivering social media content in a bilingual or multilingual region, levels of interest in and skills with using social media varying enormously across the library staff, limited funds to support more advanced social media usage or features and the training that would be required in order to enable this, maintaining engagement with library users and attracting popularity through increasing followers, likes, etc. The difficulty in maintaining library branding for content and resources made accessible via social media. Potential copyright issues when using social media, such as using YouTube to build up collections. And then external factors such as internet connectivity, technological infrastructure, and government restrictions on the use of social media which may restrict access from the library. So the common themes which re-emerged from respondents indicated that they were concerned about the amount of time and level of skill set needed in order to adequately maintain a social media channel and benefit from a good level of return success. So we'll now move on to look at the ways in which libraries are applying different social media channels, looking at some specific case studies and drawing together best practice recommendations based on all that has been learned throughout this. We look more closely at how libraries were using social media for certain tasks and which channels they felt best served a specific purpose. These can be loosely grouped into a number of key areas, including customer service through to collection development and outreach. I'll now talk in some more detail about how librarians are making use of their different social media channels. So firstly, customer service. So using social media as a customer service tool was frequently cited across our research, and you can see here some example quotes from the respondents to the survey alongside the image on the slide. A key challenge relating to customer service provision via social media is responding in a timely fashion, as users expect quick answers to their questions, whatever the time or the day of the week. Institutions in our focus groups reported declining usage of websites for accessing library service information, with some suggesting that these pages were now used primarily by external audiences. However, librarians were still putting effort into maintaining current information on websites. It was felt that social media, because of its immediacy and transient nature, was a better way to provide ongoing updates of information that was changing with any degree of frequency. The emails are still used for important reminders. During our Twitter party, we heard about some examples of how librarians are using the channel in a customer service capacity, from simple information broadcasting, as you can see in this quote at the top from Southampton Solent University, through to more detailed feedback, such as the University of Portsmouth on the second quote on the right-hand side, who are using Twitter to actively seek customer feedback. One very good example of an integrated social media strategy to ensure an excellent level of customer service is Arizona State University's varied online presence. They've taken the dual approach of supporting their very active Twitter feed with supplementary guidance, in this case via YouTube. They regularly post videos to the ASU YouTube channel, which are packaged as library minutes. So they're short, snappy 1-minute video broadcasts summarising key information about the library, for instance, how to order a interlibrary loan or the layout of the library building as examples. Each video ends with instructions on how to contact the library team through a number of different social media channels. Going on then to also look at their Twitter feed, they demonstrate fast individual responses to queries, and show an integrated approach with other areas of the university, such as retweeting messages from the IT support feed to notify students of technical issues within the library catalogue. So from gathering together the data and the feedback from all who contributed to the research, we're able to draw some key takeaway points when looking at applying social media channels as a customer service tool. A quick response to customer service queries is essential. If users feel that they're not going to get the response they need, they'll quickly move away from the social media channel, or they'll use other means to voice their views, or they won't bother to provide the feedback at all. Whilst an immediate response is probably generally unrealistic, aiming for a minimum response time will help ensure that users continue to provide feedback and return to the channel in the future. Make the most of your staff's time. If possible, assign a role to different individuals so that monitoring of the channel for responses doesn't just fall to one person. For example, one person could be responsible for posting messages whilst another person monitors for feedback to try and spread the workload a bit more widely. Try to be the ones who start the conversation so that users know that they can voice their opinions through the channel you've set up. Ask questions about that you would welcome feedback on, or arrange for regular postings about key information such as opening times or general building information. Include an invite for feedback on any promotional materials which you are producing, or any other online communications which are being sent out, such as email signatures, etc. Moving on to driving user engagement. So over time, social media can help create central communities which are strongly linked and have a very influential voice. This idea of listening to a user base could be a passive process by reading and responding to people who've engaged with your channel, or it could be an active one while librarians are actively polling their users, as is the case in the next example I'm about to show. In one of our focus groups, we heard from Ryerson University and how they've used polling software from a company called Go Soapbox to encourage interaction with students. So Go Soapbox is free to use to create polls of up to 30 people, and then larger polls require a subscription fee. With the case of Ryerson University Library, all input was welcome from their students, whether that was ideas, suggestions for change, or even complaints. Other users can then vote for their favourite idea so that the most popular suggestions become most visible on the website with the student's name against it. What Ryerson University Library then do is they take the most popular ideas and put them forward each month to senior managers, who review and decide which resulting action to take. The senior manager would then also provide a commentary on why the decision had been made, so that the users were provided with a rationale behind the whole decision-making process. The institution found the feedback they sourced through this medium invaluable. They particularly welcomed student complaints, as it enabled the institution to move forward and improve. The system was found to provide a real sense of empowerment to their students, and they always knew they would receive a quick response to their suggestions. It enabled people across the whole institution to work together to solve problems. So in terms of top tips for driving user engagement, the first one would be, despite the findings of the survey earlier on, we would suggest that using imagery to communicate ideas is a good idea. We're able to process images up to 60,000 times faster than text, and this preference may be reflective of the changing way in which users are beginning to search for information. An image can be used to convey a message far more effectively than text, and will grab the attention of the user base with more immediacy. In our telephone interviews, there were several librarians who shared their experiences of using visual social media channels such as Instagram to share messages and inspire engagement with users. One US library posted pictures of library buildings along with corresponding interesting facts, and they found that students were highly receptive to this, being motivated to comment on the original post and then go on to share their own pictures as well. In turn, they found that the number of likes to their channel dramatically increased as a result. Engage with users on topics that matter to them. One librarian commented how they like to look out for events which were important to their students, such as exam week, and entered the conversation to offer their support. This type of initiative adds a more human element to the social media channel and demonstrates that it's an open and receptive approach that's being taken. Finally, we'd suggest that variety is key when it comes to keeping users interested. If you maintain a mix of more informative message with informal observations, opinion pieces or questions, that can lead to higher engagement levels with your target audience. As one example, there was a US library who posted a daily diary of one of their first alumni dating back from 1873, which received a really good amount of attention and lots of repostings. So social media is regularly used to promote collections, particularly core databases, but current activities are diverse and unplanned. From the results of the survey that we undertook, promoting the library's collection was within the top three objectives for using social media. A key challenge, however, was found to be the niche interest of library users, which made it very difficult to serve up tailored communications. One suggestion was to work more closely with subject experts in using social media to engage with users with relevant content. Social media was recognised as having potential to encourage dialogue with users, providing opportunities for collection development. Listening was felt to be as important as broadcasting. Social media was frequently cited as a powerful collection management tool, both for hosting resources and transforming digital cataloguing. So an excellent case study of using social media as a collection management tool comes from Alan Cho, who is one of the librarians we interviewed via telephone, and he detailed how YouTube was a valuable collection management tool for the University of British Columbia in Canada. The library there uses webcasting services as a way to deliver broadcasts through the internet. These broadcasts are delivered via YouTube so that end users are able to easily view content from the comfort of their own desktops. The University of British Columbia feel that YouTube is unparalleled in its accessibility for end users and in the appeal that social media channel has. Strengths that were cited included the length of time that users spend on the channel, the use of the channel by a large non-US audience, and the ease of use via a mobile device. The institution went so far as to replace their existing collection management tool, which was Content DM, and replace it with YouTube because of the improved accessibility it brought. It also enabled a move from a rigid taxonomy to a folksonomy, which is a system of classification derived from categorizing, tagging, and annotation from external user groups. So it was apparent from much of the feedback from our focus groups that approaches to collection development and management are approached on an ad hoc basis, and many felt that social media channels were restricted to promotional activity only. So our advice in this regard would be to play to each channel's strength and integrate your approach. Select which channel to use as a promotional tool and then link in to resources held elsewhere as necessary, whether that be a library website repository, an online video, a database, or something else. Create a more structured approach so that collection development becomes a regular part of your social media plan. Some libraries cited regular initiatives such as Information Literacy Friday, when regular posts would be made about an aspect of the library's collection. Slightly more quirky posts, such as focusing on a human interest element to a collection, may create more of a buzz and encourage users to comment or repost to their friends and followers. As an example, a UK library posted pictures of an old phrenology map to represent content that they held in their History of Psychiatry section, and they reported positive resulting engagement from their user group. Moving on to slightly away from how libraries are applying social media channels and looking more at promoting the channels themselves. In our focus groups and our individual interviews, we explored how librarians are promoting the channels they've set up in order to increase their audience base and increase engagement. And these quotes on the screen here represent some of the feedback that we received as a result of that. There's widespread recognition that it takes significant effort, time and resource to ensure that social media channels are well used. Perhaps reflecting this, the most interesting finding was that nearly a third did no promotion of their sites at all. This is perhaps indicative of the nature of social media, that the experience was that users managed to find accounts which held interest for them, even if no promotion was being carried out at all. For those who are promoting their channels, the most popular avenue is through library websites. Posters and Google groups are also popular, along with posts to listserv discussion groups. Some librarians have promoted their channels through QR codes which were posted around the library building, but they'd reported very little usage of those. Promoting channels by online methods remains the most popular method, possibly due to budget constraints. Where budget does allow for print materials, typical promotion includes postcards and posters. Many librarians who contributed to our Twitter party felt that active promotion of a social media channel was beneficial in maximising their audience reach, and therefore the return on effort for those who were managing each account. Promotion was primarily through online methods, as I just mentioned, and this example here from North Warwickshire and Hinckley College in the UK demonstrates that really well. They introduced postings with a more informal, fun tone in addition to their everyday communications. Here the example is specifically of a tie-in with the 6-Book Challenge, which is an initiative which runs in the UK every year, encouraging people to read and review 6 books of their choosing. The library staff disguised themselves as well-known fictional characters, and then they asked students to guess who they were. The promotion encouraged greater interaction with their social media users and provided a more personal voice to the social media account. It also redirected students to speak with the staff directly at the university library as well. So despite the ease and relative low cost of online promotion, some librarians still felt it was also very beneficial to promote social media outside of the online world. At the University of Portsmouth, as you can see on the right-hand side here, librarians felt that going back to basics with printed flyers, posters and notes on other materials, such as overdue notices, were also really effective ways of ensuring that their social media channel remained visible and that students were aware it was an important open communication channel which was available to them. So in terms of tips for promoting your channel, make sure that you're capitalizing on any audience that you have. Clearly link between all of your different social media channels to make it as easy as possible for your users to find you on all the different channels you have a presence. Make the most of any free promotional opportunities. Include a link on email signatures, make sure there are clear links from the library website to your channels, post messages on key listservs, discussion groups, many of which are free. Also take advantage of word of mouth because it's extremely valuable promotion. Get all members of your library team on board with the promotion to make the use of any networks they're already a part of. Finally, make your budget go as far as possible. Are there any existing print materials you could borrow space on to promote your channels, for example? Due date slips, library information leaflets, etc. have all been cited through a lot of the case studies that we've looked at as being very cheap and successful ways of promoting channels and extending reach. Looking at social media policy and management now, we invited librarians to share their experiences of how they went about managing the output of their social media channels and whether they had any metrics in place for measuring the impact. Interestingly, only a very small minority of libraries are scheduling their posts in advance, with a majority of 75% of libraries approaching the output of their channels on a more ad hoc basis. Also receiving low take-up, according to our survey, was the implementation of a social media policy, with only 28% of libraries implementing a policy. However, 30% did plan to introduce one in the future. Of those who do currently manage the output of their accounts using online tools, there are a range of sites currently being used. These social media management tools can be helpful when managing multiple channels or multiple accounts on the same channel and can cut down some of the time spent planning posts considerably. So in terms of the sites used for this, Hootsuite was used by the majority of respondents, with 44% choosing to plan posts in advance using this service. However, as you can see here, there are many other tools such as TweetDeck and Feedly, which were also represented in the responses, which indicates that perhaps social media account management is still at a relatively early and experimental stage with, again, no one particular service being used over another. We found in our research that measurement of impact is generally quite ad hoc, but some institutions were beginning to analyse results more closely. The experimental nature of communications and the relative newness of the channels make benchmarking very difficult. In our in-depth interviews, one librarian from the University of British Columbia describes how she has championed measuring social media within her library. Previously, she tracked social media engagement on the account she controlled, and she shared the metrics with other accounts. With the information she gathered, she was able to present to the library executive in their annual audit and persuade the executive of the importance of reflecting on the results of social media because so much staff and student time is spent on it. Some of her colleagues still question the value of measuring social media, but the library executive is now convinced of its importance. And in March of this year, she launched a metrics campaign and training for staff across the whole library. Some of her colleagues think that they can measure engagement by the number of likes and followers, but the librarian emphasises a focus on click-through data and encourages others to do so too. Favourites tracking on Facebook and Twitter are another way that she measures engagement. So recommendations for implementing a policy and managing social media output. It would be advisable to implement a basic social media policy. Comments from the focus group suggest that while it's worthwhile to implement some form of policy in order to maintain appropriate and engaging output for a social network, it should stay as simple and easy to follow as possible. Introducing complicated style guidelines and rules may be confusing to members of staff and stifle creativity. If you put measures in place to ensure your channel stays generally on track with your library's objectives, encourage staff to bring their own ideas and questions to the fore as well. Whilst many librarians commented that tracking results can be a laborious and time-consuming task, it will also prevent you from being in the situation of running a social media account which no one is using. Basic tracking of followers, likes, mentions and sharing of posts is essential if you are to ascertain the success of your social media channel. Make sure you correlate results with real-time data of the launch of key promotions. For example, did a series of posts about a competition in your library result in a significant increase in commentary and likes on your social media page? Or was it perhaps not very well picked up on at all? This type of information will really help you evaluate posts and inform your future social media activity. Use the information that you're recording. For instance, are certain topics more popular than others? Does the timing of posts influence the success? If you can incorporate these observations into your ongoing social media plan, it tends to help with increasing user engagement and therefore follower increase. Finally, as part of the best practice guides we will be distributing over the coming months, we're going to focus on measuring and managing your social media account. So as a small plug probably here, included in this will be a tracking tool which you can use to measure the effectiveness of your social media channel. If you keep following us on Twitter, which we'll share the details of at the end of this session, we'll be able to notify you when it becomes available. So something which was of key concern to many librarians that we questioned throughout this process, predicting the future of social media in the library is obviously of key concern, but it's also a very tricky business. The word all here on the screen represents the most popular descriptive words which were included in the responses from librarians to the question, how do you see social media impacting on roles of librarians in the future? It's very difficult to read anything definitive into this selection of words, but themes such as information flow, necessity and service provision are coming through. At this point, it would be lovely to be able to look into a crystal ball, but unfortunately I don't have one to hand just at the moment. Many of our librarians were particularly interested in the future of social media, and as you can see from the answers to the two questions here, a resounding majority of librarians see it as having an important place in the library going forward, and they expect to see more dedicated social media roles appear with time. How and what that future might look like was harder to articulate, but the next slide will give some idea of how librarians feel social media will evolve in the future. The opinions amongst librarians as to where it will head are quite varied, and you can see here some examples of comments that were offered about how they feel social media will develop, which might give some indication of what the future may bring. Some of the ideas suggested in our focus groups included the need for the library to be more strategic, integrating social media more closely with their other existing systems. There were also several mentions of the changing demands of customers who are becoming increasingly tech-savvy and well-connected online, with a growing expectation of immediate response times. So overall, while some felt that social media was a transient communication method, the majority believe that social media will form an increasingly central part of the librarian's role and become an everyday part of communication with end users. So that's where I'm going to leave the presentation for today. Please do go and browse the white paper for yourself at the website that's listed on the page here. What I've covered today really does just represent a small sample of the wealth of information which can be found there. You can also browse the full data behind the online survey either through this link, which also has further analysis of social media used by librarian role, and it's also on Figshare as well. All the data is offered under a Creative Commons license, and so it can be freely used to inform further study subject to the relevant citations. We see the white paper as being just a start to the conversation. As I mentioned briefly earlier, Taylor and Francis plan to build a central web-based resource on social media for the library community, which will provide ongoing updates, in-depth case studies and best practice guides. We hope that this will become a valuable developing resource that librarians will benefit from and continue to contribute to, so that the sharing of ideas and experience can continue. As I mentioned, I think the first instalment will focus on measuring the impact of social media and include that best practice guide on how to best monitor and manage your account. So it's definitely something which is worth keeping an eye out for. If you have any comments or experiences with social media that you'd like to share with us, or you'd like to contribute further to our research, we'd really love to hear more from you. Please do send a question through to me now, or alternatively I can be reached via Twitter at Library Lantern. The address is on the screen here, or an email at jodie.bell@tnf.co.uk. So that's it for now. I will give everyone just a minute or two to send through some questions to me before I move on to answering some of those. So the line will go silent for a moment until we move on to those. Thank you very much. Okay, so hopefully that's given everyone enough time to type in any questions that they had. I see there are quite a few questions about not being able to hear at the very beginning, which I'm hoping was just due to the fact that it was a slightly delayed start due to us having some issues with the computer at this end. So I hope you all managed to clearly hear me throughout the majority of that session. So I've just got time for a couple of questions. First of all, someone has asked about whether the study gave any indication of how or whether social media is being used in the Middle East and Asia. Well, it gave us limited insight into this area, to be honest, and it is something that I would very much like to address. I think it's definitely worth exploring further social media use in regions such as those, particularly Asia, and so I aim to set up further focus groups and surveys with librarians in those regions. The aim would be for this to then form the subject of one of those bi-monthly online releases we plan. So the first one we already have set would be the measuring the impact, but then we'll go on to aim to release those every other month. So the website, the link that's on the screen here, actually the website will grow to include those sort of miniature versions of the white papers, if you like. And I think given that the online community has such a different working in Asia, that's definitely a region we'd like to look into. So definitely do keep an eye out for that. Someone else has asked if we could expand further on the tracking of social media statistics. So what would we advise recording in particular in order to determine if an account has become successful? So I think I covered that to some degree in the presentation, that although monitoring usage is at an early stage, those who are beginning to look into metrics and everyone we've spoken to throughout this process would really recommend that it's useful to record at least basic measurements of how your social media account is performing in order to well, obviously it forms very interesting reading to look over the statistics, but it's also really useful ammunition to demonstrate the value in the time you're spending and the staff resource you're dedicating to these channels. I'd really suggest focusing on the engagement of your audience in addition to just basic information such as likes and followers and so on, because I think probably what you need to bear in mind the most is the objective behind why you set up that social media account in the first place. So I would assume most of the time that would be in order to engage as much as possible with the largest possible audience for your library. So in other words, the best thing to be looking at in that instance would be, rather than followers and likes, is the clicks through to your website, who's actually engaging and interacting with your content, reposting, commenting about it, because that's a clearer demonstration of an active and useful feed. It was quite interesting actually to see in the news yesterday there was an example of an online website, I think called Copyblogger, which made the very brave decision, even though they had 38,000 followers to their Facebook page, they decided to close it, which I think is quite interesting and sometimes a difficult decision that this data might also bring about, but as well as deciding where you're usefully engaging with users, it might also bring about data to suggest that perhaps it was better used elsewhere, but that's something obviously to ascertain at the time. I think we're probably drawing towards 3 o'clock here, if that's right. I can't see any other questions at the moment. Well, what I will do is I will keep an eye out. As I say, please do contact me via email if there's anything you would like to know, and I will make sure that I contact you offline afterwards. I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I hope there's something that you can take away and use practically in your own library. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.